And we are on day 20 on this 20-day flower creation journey. This means today is the last day we have to paint together a flower from the flower color book. Today we're going to paint the butterfly ranunculus, that is this beautiful yellow flower with wide round shape petals and long green leaves. So the way we approach this flower composition is to start to paint the flowers first. And I'm gonna start to build this flower with the first layer. So I've mixed on my color palette a little bit of yellow lemon dip, and with my filbert brush I start to create these petals by pressing onto the paper the belly of this brush. I'm creating round shape petals, and I am changing the color value and the color hue, in particular the color hue, and I add a few strokes of more concentrated yellow ochre to give to these petals of this flower, the first butterfly ranunculus, different color hues and color shades. When the first butterfly ranunculus is ready, I start to create the second, and I start from the inner petals. I keep in mind to have all the petals leading to the same center, and using a quite heavy pressure on my brush, I create these petals in round shape. When the inner petals are ready, I keep creating the outer petals using the tip of the brush and the side of the brush. In this moment, the petals of this second ranunculus don't have to be perfectly defined. We are going to build on definition when we are going to add the second layer of paint. I keep in mind to change the color hue and the color value. By changing the color value, I'm going to have different concentration of the same color onto paper. That means that sometimes some brush strokes have a high concentration of pigment, and sometimes instead some of the brush strokes have a little amount of pigment onto the brush because the pigment has been released into the cup of water. I created the third ranunculus on the top of the two that I've just created, and I try to give it a different orientation. So I'm creating this third ranunculus, giving it a different orientation, a different perspective, and in this way I'm gonna turn it a bit towards the upper corners of the page. I'm going to create a very last ranunculus, similar in the orientation and in the perspective to the one just below, right next to the upper left corner. If I want to create a perspective on these two ranunculus, as I've done, I will have more petals in the bottom part, in the opposite side, let's say, compared to where the flower is looking to. When I paint the first layer, I always like to add a few brush strokes of a different color, where I change basically the color hue, and this is clearly visible in this first layer of all of these flowers I've created, where there is a little bit of yellow ochre that is popping up. With a round brush in size 6, I started to create the stems and the leaves. I take such a brush because this brush has a fine tip, and just with a little bit of pressure I'm able to create a very fine line. I keep in mind the reference picture to understand where to put these stems, and I use mainly the sap green color to create these stems and leaves. The leaves are created just by pressing onto the paper the point, the tip of this brush, and then pressing onto the belly of the brush and then releasing just the tip. You can create thicker leaves by using the same movement on the right side of the leaf and then on the left side of the leaf. If you wanted to have just a thinner leaf, just give the pressure once. I see on the original picture that these flowers have a bunch of buds, and this is what I'm trying to reproduce here as well. So I've created a bud on the upper right corner of this page, and I'm adding a few leaves through these brush strokes of pressing onto the paper and releasing the pressure of this brush. At this point, I can take a little bit of yellow lemon dip and yellow ochre, and with this mixture I started to build the second layer on top of the first one where the petals have been created. Basically, with this second step, I'm trying to create more dimension and create some shadow and some shades in some of the petals of these flowers. I'm using generally the same color that I've used for the first layer, but I'm creating some brush strokes that are just fine lines and some brush strokes that are a little bit like small blobs of color. The second layer is generally a little bit darker compared to the first one and allows these flowers really to pop and have their own dimension. I am looking at the reference picture to understand where to add these lines, but I'm also using my intuition and my feelings, and I'm honestly also just playing with the colors and with what I've created, and I'm just trying to find the best place to add these brush strokes. There is no right and no wrong, and honestly, adding this second layer of paint is not easy task. So don't be too hard on yourself. Try to follow the reference picture to understand where to add these lines, play a little bit with what you have created, and don't be too strong. With the time, this process will become easier and you will understand better where to place these brush strokes. I am generally creating brush strokes in this moment that emphasize the round shape of these petals. When I add the second layer, as I'm doing now, it takes me always a little bit of time to understand where to place these brush strokes in order to create something that I actually like. Therefore, in this moment, the process is a little bit slow, but honestly, when I'm in the process of painting, adding the second layer is something that I like very much doing. I find this gives me a little bit the time to sit, to think, and to really enjoy the process of watercolor painting. I apply the same method and technique to the fourth flower on top, And as I did for the other 3 flowers as well, I'm using mainly a mixture of yellow ochre and yellow lemon dip. In this example, I've used, for the second layer, basically the same colors as the base, because I see from the reference picture this is a bright yellow flower, and the shades and shadows that I see on the picture are also in a very similar color. But I encourage you to try and experiment if you'd like, adding even some brush strokes of colors that are quite different from the bright yellow that we see on the picture. You can try to experiment this also with other colors, so this is just a reminder that you can add layers and also deviate from what you see on the picture to create something that you like maybe more. In this moment, using the very fine tip of this brush, I'm creating some yellow ochre circle, and I will add in a second moment the black center. For the black center in particular, I take the color Mars Black from Winsor & Newton, and I just touch with the tip of this brush the center that I've left empty. At this point, I take a look at what I have created. I just refine and add a few details where I think maybe some color is missing, but I really start to take a step back and enjoy what I've done. While I look at this flower composition, I realize that there is some white space in the upper left corner of this page, and therefore I create another bud similar to the one that I've created on the right side. I mix a little bit of sub-green with the Prussian blue, and with this darker green I create a little bit of contrast on the right and left buds that I've created. I fill in the buds that I've created with a mixture of yellow lemon dip and a little bit of yellow ochre. This is the same mixture that I've used for the flowers, and I just create some sort of half moons where these buds in green have been created. As I complete the left bud, I proceed to do the same with the right bud. And at this point, we have reached the end of this tutorial, but also the end of this 20-day flower creation journey. I really hope you found these tutorials interesting and you have learned something. Thank you for following along. See you in the next video.